Contemplation is key when you are in a bout of learning and you hit on a profound point or something that you want to internalize. Contemplation is key to getting this to stick into your brain. It's not about how many books you read, it's about what you get out of the books that you have read. I would rather read one book in, let's say, a month than four books in a month if I actually internalize and have the information in that first book stick instead of reading four books and having nothing really stick and not really being able to tell you much of anything from any of the books. It is better to have deep contemplation and thoughts and ways to internalize and help it stick into your brain than, just getting information overload. There's nothing wrong with taking, 10 hours to watch a 3-hour podcast if there's a lot of very good and points that are being brought up and you want to pause it and contemplate it and think for yourself, because that's truly how things stick into your brain. You need to trust but verify the things that people are telling you. You're not just a sheep and you just trust what they are saying for two reasons. For one, you want to formulate your own opinions about things and not just follow people to follow people. And two, that's how it sticks into your brain. When you learn a lesson and you say, oh, that's like when this happens in my life, I need to start doing this when that happens. So then next time that does happen, then you remember, oh yeah, I watched or read something about this and I agreed with the facts that were being brought to the table, and I'm going to act in this way now in this circumstance because of what I have learned and what I have read about the situation that I am in and that keeps arising in my life. But if you just hear that and you think, oh, that's a good point, but you don't really stick it to anything that's going on in your life or contemplate it at all, then it's just going to be in one ear, out the other. And you're not going to remember it. And you're not going to be able to gain anything from that knowledge and that time you're spending learning. And a key part in learning is focus. And you have to focus when you're in a bout of learning. You can't just be, you know, thinking about this, looking over there, and then trying to reel yourself back into learning. The mind absorbs nothing deeply when it is distracted. You need to be attentive to what you are learning and what you are doing, or your mind is not gonna internalize what you're learning, and therefore it'll be in one ear, out the other, and you won't get anything from it. You could spend a whole day reading, writing, watching podcasts, listening to informational videos, but if you don't take a second in between any of those to actually contemplate what you're learning, actually think about it, and on top of that, you're not even really paid attention, you're kind of half paid attention, then you gain nothing from that. You get more out of, say, a 4-hour work bout, if that's intense 4 hours, full concentration, full contemplation, than if you spend 8 hours doing something, but you're kind of, half in, half out. Every 15 minutes or so, you scroll on your phone for like a minute or two. You don't really care about what you're learning about. You're not really trying to route it back to real world issues and real world things that go on in your life, so when they arise you can remember, oh yeah, I learned blank when I was reading this book, or I learned blank when I was watching that podcast. I should do this in this situation. So contemplation is key, first off. And when you're learning, be attentive, be all into your learning. It's not beneficial to be 50-50 in learning. You don't want to be lukewarm, as the Bible talks about. It's worse to be a lukewarm believer than not a believer at all, because I mean, different reasons, but I think the Bible main reason is because you know the truth, but you don't really act upon it. At least if the people who aren't don't even know, so they can claim ignorance, but the person who knows and is still lukewarm is a bigger fault. So don't be lukewarm. Be 100%. Give 100%. Give your all. And if you give your all, say for 4 hours, it should help you to know and help you to realize that that 4 hours is better spent than, and you gained more out of that 4 hours than you would have gained out of an 8 hour work bout, because of how attentive you were and how focused you were and how much you actually cared. So it'll save you time, it'll save you energy, and so much more. That's why one reason I really want to work for myself, so I can have more of an incentive in work life to just go full at it, for 4 to 8 hours, instead of wasting time just sitting around doing nothing, and all this stuff. And that's down a whole rabbit hole, but really just being able to have an incentive to go hard for a long period of time, so you can relax, rest, contemplate for the other period of time, and not feel the need to work 20 hours a day, when in reality you could get the same out of 6 hours, 6 to 8 hours of hard work, instead of 20 hours of lukewarm work. So when you're learning anything, I believe it is key, as I was saying, to contemplate it, and to reroute it back to things that are going on in your life, so you can internalize it and help it stick even better. When you are reading, don't try to check a box. Don't try to see how fast you can read this 500-page book. You're not getting any reward. No one cares how fast you can read a 500-page book. But people, they won't care. But it does matter how or what you get out of that 500-page book. And it doesn't matter if it takes you a month or a year. It matters the lessons you gain. It matters the skills that you get, the how it changed your life, how it really affected you. That's what matters. It doesn't matter how many books you've read. You could have read a million books, but if you don't remember any of the lessons you learned from those books, then it's no use to you. And a person who's read 3 books that are good, really good books, and has spent hours in contemplation and thinking about the lines and the passages and the lessons that they're trying to make you think about and trying to learn, that person gets way more out of those 3 books than someone would get out of a million books. So, oh yeah, another thing I wanted to touch upon in this video is, when you go through a big bout of learning, say you just watched a 3-hour podcast, and the podcast is over, and you're like, all right, now what? Contemplate the podcast. Don't just go to the next podcast. Don't turn on music. Don't go have a superficial conversation with somebody. If you really enjoyed and really want to remember the things you heard in that podcast, contemplate it. Think about it. Have some quiet time to just think about the things you've learned, and think about the things you really want to remember. If you can take one thing away from that podcast, I think it would be beneficial to you. Just one thing. So pick one thing, because you can't remember everything. At least I can't. So I try to just pick one thing. And if you can pick one thing every single day, it's 365 things at the end of the year, and 3,650 at the end of 10 years. So, just one thing every day adds up over time. It compounds. So just try to get one thing every single day. And if you're in a position where you just went through an extensive bout of learning, and you can't just sit there for the next hour or 15, even 15 or 10 or so minutes contemplating what you just went over, because you have to go into a social setting, talk about what you just learned in the social setting. You don't have to hide the things you just learned, and you don't have to hide the things you're passionate about, and you don't have to hide the things that you're thinking about. If you just watch, say Andrew Huberman, and you just learned out some really cool things about how the frontal lobe and the other big words, how like the frontal lobe, works. Go talk to somebody about that, and then you'll find you can recall that conversation and you'll remember those things better. But if you just go into a social setting and you don't even talk about the things you just learned that you're actually passionate and actually care about, then you're just going to forget them and they're going to be drowned out by the superficial conversations of life. So don't be afraid to talk about people about these things. And if you don't think they want to talk about it, then I would just suggest that you try, because you never know till you try. And maybe they could actually be really interested in it, and maybe they can also give you a perspective you didn't think about, and then that can lead to a whole nother tunnel of contemplation on your end. So contemplation is key, as always, as I've said like a million times in this, and just not just not just forgetting what you just learned about for the last 3 hours, but actually bring it into the real world and talking to people about it if that is the situation that you're in.